Data's body is literally built different. Let's start with the most obvious thing. Ted Bundy's whole game was physical domination. He'd sneak up on women, hit them with whatever was nearby, strangle them, and take control. That's it. That's the entire playbook. And for years, it worked. Because every single one of his victims was human, and humans are fragile. Now imagine trying that on a guy whose skull is made from the same alloys used to build starship hulls. Bundy's weapon of choice at the Chi Omega sorority house was literally a piece of firewood. A log. Against Data, that's not a weapon. That's a stick. Data weighs somewhere around 100 kilograms of dense metal alloys and composite materials. We're talking space-grade alloys in his cranium, the same class of materials used in starship hull construction. A wooden club connecting with that is not going to do anything except maybe leave a scuff mark. And it's not just his head. His entire internal structure is engineered to withstand stresses that would destroy a human body. He's taken falls from heights that would kill any person on Earth and walked away completely fine. His spine alone is reinforced with a polyalloy support system designed specifically for extreme stress resistance. Bundy was a strong guy by human standards, sure. But human standards stop meaning anything the second you're swinging at someone built like a tank. Now, let's talk about strangulation. Because that was Bundy's signature. That was the thing he kept coming back to. The method he used to exert what he called ultimate control over his victims. It's a horrifying tactic, and against a human being, it works. You cut off the oxygen, the brain shuts down, it's over. Data doesn't breathe to survive. He simulates breathing to regulate his internal systems and manage heat, but there's no oxygen flowing to a brain that needs it. There's no trachea to collapse. Cutting off his air supply does literally nothing to him. He can function in the vacuum of space. The idea of Bundy wrapping his hands around Data's throat and waiting for him to lose consciousness is almost darkly funny when you think about it. Bundy's most reliable, most practiced kill method is completely and totally useless here. He'd be standing there squeezing and Data would just look at him. You cannot sneak up on a computer. Bundy was what criminologists call a blitz attacker. He relied on catching people completely off guard, because that's the only way a regular person can overpower someone before they have a chance to fight back or run. The whole con, the fake cast, the fake injury, the fake authority figure, all of it existed for one reason: to get close enough to strike before the victim could react. Here's the problem with trying that on Data. His brain processes information at roughly 60 trillion operations per second. Human reaction time sits somewhere around 200 milliseconds on a good day. By the time Bundy's arm is even halfway through a swing, Data has already run through thousands of possible responses and selected the optimal one. This isn't an exaggeration for dramatic effect. Data has literally dodged phaser blasts before. Actual energy beams, moving at the speed of light. He just moved his head out of the way. A guy lunging at him with a piece of wood isn't even a rounding error in his threat assessment. And the strength gap is almost embarrassing to talk about. Data has held back a running car engine with one hand. He can bend materials that would stop a bullet. His grip strength alone, based on what we've seen him do on screen, is operating at a level that would shatter human bone on contact. If Bundy tried to restrain Data the way he restrained his victims, handcuffs, rope, whatever he had on hand, Data could probably snap those restraints just by flexing his forearm. A physical confrontation between these two isn't a fight. It's over in about 2 seconds, and Bundy is the one on the ground. Bundy's best trick doesn't work on a robot. Here's where it gets really interesting, because Bundy wasn't just physically dangerous, he was genuinely charming. That's what made him so uniquely terrifying compared to other killers of his era. He was good-looking, well-spoken, educated, and he knew exactly how to read people and make them feel comfortable. He'd fake a broken arm, ask for help loading something into his car, and by the time the victim realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Carol Durant barely escaped with her life, and she was one of the lucky ones. That whole routine requires the other person to feel empathy, to see someone struggling and instinctively want to help. That's a deeply human response, and Bundy was an expert at triggering it. But Data doesn't have that vulnerability in the same way. He processes social interactions through logic and pattern recognition rather than instinctive emotional response. So when Bundy walks up with a fake cast on his arm and a story about needing help, Data's internal sensors are already scanning the limb and detecting perfectly healthy bone and tissue underneath. The story doesn't match the biology. That's flagged as a deliberate deception before Bundy even finishes his sentence. And even if Bundy skipped the ruse entirely and just tried to act normal and friendly, Data would be quietly monitoring his heart rate, his pupil dilation, the microtremors in his hands, the subtle physiological shifts that happen when someone is preparing to commit violence. Psychopaths are known for being able to maintain a cool exterior, but even the most disciplined psychopath can't fully suppress what's happening inside their body. Data would be reading all of it in real time. Bundy's charm is a tool built specifically for humans. It has absolutely no purchase on a positronic brain that sees the data underneath the performance. Bundy was only invisible because the system was blind. One of the most frustrating things about the Bundy case, when you look back at it now, is how long it took to catch him. He drove across multiple states, killed in different jurisdictions, and exploited the fact that police departments barely communicated with each other back then. There was no centralized database connecting the dots. Evidence was processed, slowly and manually. The bite mark analysis that finally helped convict him, the thing that linked him to the Chi Omega murders, was considered cutting-edge forensics at the time. That's how primitive the investigative toolkit was. Data doesn't have any of those limitations. His memory capacity is essentially incomprehensible by human standards. We're talking hundreds of petabytes worth of information, all of it instantly cross-referenced and searchable. Every missing persons report, every recovered piece of jewelry, every gas station receipt, every eyewitness description, connected and analyzed in milliseconds. The pattern that took human investigators years to piece together. The consistent victim profile, the geographic clustering, the vehicle type, the MO. Data would have that mapped out probably within days of the first disappearance. And his sensor capabilities make the whole hiding evidence thing basically impossible. Bundy used to return to his dump sites. He'd go back to be with the bodies, sometimes for days or weeks after the murders. In Data's world, that habit is a fatal mistake. Data can detect residual heat signatures, microscopic fiber transfers, trace biological material at a level that 1970s forensics couldn't even conceive of. The gap between crimes committed and crimes actually solved essentially disappears when Data is working the case. Data doesn't get tired, scared, or fooled. Bundy's longevity as a killer came down to human limitations on both sides of the equation. His victims were scared and physically outmatched. The investigators were overworked, under-resourced, and operating with tools that simply weren't up to the task. And Bundy himself was smart enough and disciplined enough to exploit every single one of those gaps. Data removes every one of those variables simultaneously. He doesn't sleep, which means there's no window of inattention to exploit. He doesn't feel fear, which means Bundy's psychological control tactics are completely worthless. He can't be charmed, manipulated, or worn down over time. And his ethical programming means he's not going to hesitate or second-guess himself when he identifies a clear threat to human life. Here's something worth thinking about. Bundy actually escaped from custody twice. Twice. Once by jumping out of a courthouse window, and once by crawling through a hole in his jail cell ceiling. Both times, he got away because human systems have gaps. Guards get tired, attention drifts, procedures get sloppy. Data doesn't have those gaps. His attention doesn't drift at hour 14 of a stakeout. His memory doesn't fail when he's trying to recall the exact details of a suspect's movements. Once Bundy is on Data's radar, the outcome is already decided. There's no escape route that a positronic brain hasn't already calculated and closed off. And here's another thing people don't talk about enough. Bundy represented himself in court. He genuinely believed he was charming and intelligent enough to work the legal system in his favor, to manipulate the proceedings through sheer personality. That worked to some degree with human judges and juries who could be swayed by his demeanor. Data as a witness provides only perfect factual recall and algorithmic responses. There's nothing to manipulate, no emotional current to redirect. Every lie Bundy told on the stand would be immediately contradicted by a mind that recorded everything with perfect clarity and has no reason to soften the truth. The fantasy collapses. There's something worth sitting with here, because it gets at the psychological core of why Bundy did what he did. A huge part of what drove him wasn't just the violence itself, it was the anticipation, the build-up, the sense of power that came from knowing he was the most dangerous thing in the room and that nobody around him had any idea. He described the period leading up to a crime as more stimulating than the aftermath. The fantasy of total control was the engine that kept him going. Facing Data would destroy that fantasy completely, and probably pretty quickly. There's no fear to feed off of, no agency to strip away, no human vulnerability to exploit. Data doesn't experience terror, and he can't be made to feel helpless. Bundy would be standing in front of something that can see through every lie he tells, can't be hurt by anything he does, and views him not as a worthy adversary but simply as a biological system that is behaving in a way that needs to be corrected. Think about what that does to someone whose entire sense of self is built around being the smartest and most dangerous person in the room. Bundy's grandiose self-image, the belief that he was superior to everyone around him, that he could outsmart any system, that he was fundamentally untouchable, that collapses the moment he realizes he's completely powerless. He can't hurt Data. He can't fool Data. He can't run from Data. Bundy encountered resistance before. Carol Durant fought back and escaped, and it rattled him enough that he became more reckless afterward. Facing something that is physically invulnerable and cognitively impenetrable wouldn't just rattle him, it would break him. The psychological foundation that his entire criminal identity was built on would crumble, and there'd be nothing left underneath it. The outcome was never in question. Bundy's success as a predator was never really about him being exceptional. It was about the environment he operated in. He was smart for a human. He was charming for a human. He was organized for a human. And he was hunting in a world where the systems designed to stop him were fragile, slow, and full of blind spots. Data eliminates every single one of those advantages at once. The physical fragility that Bundy relied on, gone. The cognitive blind spots of human empathy that he exploited, gone. The technological darkness of the 1970s that let him move between states like a ghost, gone. What's left is just a man, a fragile, slow-moving, biologically transparent man with no means of harming his opponent, and no way to hide his true nature from a mind that processes deception the same way it processes everything else. Instantly, completely, and without mercy. The predator becomes the most vulnerable thing in the room, and unlike Bundy's victims, Data doesn't hesitate and doesn't feel pity. The outcome isn't a battle. It's a correction. And it was never going to go any other way.